The towering figure moved through the frontier market like a storm cloud, his presence parting the crowd without effort. At 6'7", Takuna was a giant even among his Apache people, his scarred face a map of battles won. When he saw her on the auction block, pale, trembling, but somehow defiant, something stirred in him he couldn't name. With gold earned from years as a scout, he purchased her without a word. The whispers followed them out. "Poor girl," they said, "bought by the savage." But as Maria looked up at her new owner, she saw something beyond the fearsome warrior others cowered before. Could a woman sold as property possibly find freedom in the hands of the very man who bought her? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The journey from the trading post took them through rugged terrain as the sun cast long shadows across the plains. Maria sat stiffly on the horse Takuna had provided, maintaining as much distance as the saddle would allow. She watched his broad back as he led them eastward, toward what fate she could only imagine. Takuna felt her gaze but kept his eyes forward. The medicine pouch at his hip swung gently with each step of his horse. Inside were tokens from a life spent between worlds: an army brass button, an eagle feather, a smooth river stone from his childhood, and a silver cross that had belonged to the first white man who'd shown him kindness. Each item represented a piece of the complex man he'd become. "We stop soon," he said in accented English, glancing back at her. "Creek ahead." Maria nodded wordlessly, her throat dry from hours of silence. The reality of her situation was still sinking in. Yesterday she had been property of a merchant who died on the journey west. Today she belonged to this formidable warrior whose reputation had preceded him in frightened whispers. When they reached the creek, Takuna dismounted with surprising grace for a man of his size. He approached Maria's horse and looked up at her, dark eyes unreadable. "You drink. Rest." He gestured to the water. When she didn't move, he added, "I not hurt you." Something in his tone made her believe him, though caution kept her wary. She slid from the saddle, legs unsteady after the long ride. Takuna stepped back, giving her space. At the water's edge, Maria cupped her hands and drank deeply. The cool water was the first mercy this day had offered. When she turned, she found Takuna watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Why did you buy me?" she asked in Spanish, not expecting him to understand. To her surprise, he responded in halting Spanish. "Bad man want you, Mackenzie, known for cruelty to women." Maria's eyes widened. "You speak Spanish?" "Some words. Was Army Scout. Learn English, Spanish, Comanche." He tapped his chest. "Apache first." As they made camp for the night, Maria observed how methodically he worked, how precise his movements were. Nothing wasted, nothing for show. He built a small fire and offered her jerky and dried fruit from his provisions. "Tomorrow reach my home," he said as twilight settled around them. "You have own room. Door locks from inside." He pointed at her, then at the door lock gesture he made. "Your choice. You safe there until—" "Until what?" she asked. "Until safe place found for you. I not keep woman as slave." His expression hardened. "Not Apache way. Not my way." Maria studied him in the firelight. "Then why did you buy me at all?" Takuna was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. Finally, he reached for his medicine pouch and withdrew the silver cross, holding it in his massive palm. "Father Thomas teach me, help others when you can. Even small help better than no help." He returned the cross to his pouch. "You not safe at auction. Now you safe until better place." As night deepened around them, Maria wrapped herself in the blanket he'd provided and watched as Takuna took position several yards away, giving her privacy while still standing guard. For the first time since being placed on the auction block, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that tomorrow might be better than today. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was that this man, this savage as the settlers called him, had shown more humanity than most who claimed civilization. The homestead appeared as they crested a gentle hill, nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered slopes. Maria's eyes widened at the unexpected sight. Not a teepee or primitive shelter, but a proper cabin with smoke curling from a stone chimney. Near it stood a small barn and corral, a garden plot, and what appeared to be a spring house. Takuna watched her reaction without comment, the faintest hint of pride in his otherwise stoic expression. He dismounted and helped her down, his hands respectfully brief on her waist. "My home," he said simply, leading the horses toward the corral. Maria followed, taking in details that spoke volumes about the man who'd purchased her. The homestead showed an unusual blend of worlds. The cabin was built of sturdy logs in settler fashion, but decorative elements reflected Apache design. Most striking was the hand-carved cedar door, its surface etched with intricate patterns that caught the afternoon light. After tending to the horses, Takuna led her to the cabin. He paused at the threshold, his massive frame nearly filling the doorway. "Enter freely," he said in Apache, then translated, "You welcome here." Inside, the single large room was divided by woven screens into functional areas. A cooking hearth with cast iron cookware, a table and chairs hewn from local timber, shelves lined with books that surprised her, and furs and blankets creating comfortable seating areas. Everything was immaculately clean, organized with military precision. Takuna moved to one of the screens and slid it aside, revealing a smaller room with a narrow bed, small table, and wooden chest. "Your room," he said. "Door here locks." He demonstrated a sliding wooden bolt. "You keep key." He handed her a small wooden key for the chest. "Your things safe." Maria entered the room cautiously. On the table sat a ceramic pitcher and basin, a small mirror and a brush. The bed was made with clean linens and a colorful blanket. She ran her fingers over the soft fabric, then noticed women's clothing folded on the chest. "These are not mine," she said. "My sister's," Takuna replied, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "She gone many seasons. You use until we make new clothes for you." He left her to settle in, his footsteps retreating across the main room. Maria sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process this unexpected turn. Nothing about this place matched the fearsome tales she'd heard of Apache warriors or the life she'd expected after being sold. That night, she ventured from her room to find Takuna preparing a simple meal. He nodded toward the table where two bowls waited. They ate in silence until Maria gathered her courage. "Your home is beautiful," she said in halting English. "Not what I expected." Takuna looked up, surprise evident in his dark eyes. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Not this. Not books and carved furniture and—" She gestured around them. "This piece." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Most people see only the warrior, the scout, the tall man who looks dangerous." He touched his scarred cheek. "Few see the man who builds, who reads, who lives. Why do you live alone? Away from your people?" His face closed again. "Complicated. I walk between worlds. Army scout many years. Some Apache call me traitor. Some whites call me savage. Here," he gestured to the homestead, "I am just Takuna." As darkness settled outside, Maria returned to her room, sliding the bolt into place as he'd shown her. Through the small window, she could see Takuna sitting by the outdoor fire, his profile sharp against the flames. A feared warrior who carved beautiful doors. A man rejected by two worlds who had built his own. A buyer of humans who offered keys and locks to ensure her privacy. Sleep came easier than she expected, the soft bed and exhaustion from the journey overtaking her racing thoughts. Her last waking thought was a question she couldn't yet answer. Was this strange arrangement to be her salvation or merely a different kind of cage? Dawn broke peacefully over the homestead as Maria emerged from her room after her third night under Takuna's roof. She found him already outside, tending to the horses. Each day had established more routine, more small exchanges, gradually easing her fears. She was brushing her hair with a Spanish comb, her one possession from before, when she heard it, the subtle shift in the morning bird songs. Something was wrong. Maria stepped onto the porch, eyes scanning the tree line. There, a flash of movement where no movement should be. Without thinking, she rushed toward Takuna in the corral. "Someone's there," she whispered urgently, pointing toward the trees. "Hiding." Takuna stiffened, his hand moving to the knife at his belt. "Inside," he commanded. "Lock door." "But, now." His voice was steel, his eyes already tracking multiple positions around the homestead. Maria had just reached the porch when the first shot cracked through the morning air. Takuna dropped and rolled as dust kicked up where he'd stood a second before. 3 men emerged from the tree line, another 2 from behind the spring house. "There's the Injun bastard," one shouted. "And look, he's got himself a Mexican woman." Maria froze, terror rooting her in place as one of the men spotted her and changed direction. Takuna saw it too and moved with shocking speed, hurling his knife with deadly accuracy. The man screamed and fell as the others opened fire. Without conscious thought, Maria grabbed the axe leaning against the woodpile and ran toward the cabin. A bullet splintered the door frame inches from her head. She stumbled inside, slamming the heavy cedar door behind her. Through the window, she watched in horror and awe as Takuna fought. Gone was the quiet man of the past days, replaced by the warrior of legend. He moved like smoke between bullets, appearing where least expected. One attacker fell, then another. The third rushed him with a knife, and they grappled in a deadly dance before Takuna broke the man's neck with a single brutal motion. The remaining raiders retreated toward the trees, firing wildly. One bullet found its mark, grazing Takuna's shoulder. He barely seemed to notice as he pursued them, vanishing into the forest. The sudden silence was deafening. Maria clutched the axe, breath coming in short gasps as she waited. Minutes stretched like hours before Takuna reappeared, blood on his hands and shirt, his expression cold and distant. When he entered the cabin, Maria stepped back instinctively. This was not the man who had quietly shared meals with her. This was the giant Apache that mothers warned their children about. He saw her fear and stopped, deliberately setting down his weapons. "They gone," he said, voice rough. "Dead or running. Came thinking I was away." His eyes met hers. "You saved my life. Warning me." Maria lowered the axe, her hands shaking. "Who were they?" "Bounty hunters. Deserters. Men who hate Apache." He touched his wounded shoulder with a grimace. "Also thieves." As the adrenaline faded, Maria noticed something crunching beneath her foot. Her comb lay shattered on the floor, broken in her panicked flight. She knelt to gather the pieces, a small sob escaping as she held the fragments of her last connection to her past. Takuna watched her, his fierce expression softening slightly. "We fix," he said quietly. She looked up at him, this contradiction of a man, capable of such violence yet standing respectfully at a distance to avoid frightening her further. "Why did you fight for me?" she asked. "You could have let them take me." "You are under my protection," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "And you are not property to be taken." That night, as Takuna sat by the fire cleaning his wounds, Maria realized something had fundamentally changed. She was no longer merely a woman he had rescued from a cruel fate. By warning him, by choosing his side against the attackers, she had made a choice that could not be unmade. Their fates were now entangled in ways neither had anticipated. By morning, Takuna's wound had worsened. The bullet graze burned angry red, his skin hot to the touch when Maria dared examine it. She found him attempting to reach it with a cloth, his movements stiff with pain. "Let me," she said, taking the cloth from his hand. He hesitated, then nodded once, sitting on a stool and allowing her access to his shoulder. The wound needed more than water. Maria recalled herbs her grandmother had used for infections. "Do you have medicines? Plants for healing?" Takuna pointed to a leather pouch hanging by the hearth. Inside, Maria found dried plants, some familiar, others strange to her. She selected what she recognized, yarrow and sage, then pointed to a purple-flowered plant. "This, echinacea," he said. "Good medicine." Working in silence, Maria crushed the herbs and mixed them with bear fat from a small clay pot, creating a healing salve. The familiar work calmed her, reminding her of helping her grandmother treat injuries in their village long ago. When she applied the mixture to his wound, Takuna didn't flinch, though she knew it must sting fiercely. His stoicism both impressed and troubled her. "You feel no pain?" she asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Feel much pain. Show little. Apache way? Warrior way," he corrected. "Also useful for army scout. White soldiers respect man who shows no weakness." As she wrapped his shoulder with clean cloth, Maria found herself studying the landscape of scars across his upper body. Bullet wounds, knife marks, a burn that spread across his left side. His body told a story of violence and survival. "How did you become scout?" she asked, tying off the bandage. "For men who fight your people?" Takuna was quiet so long she thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was low, reflective. "My family killed by Comanche raid when I was boy. Orphan. Outcast because I was too big. Too strange." He touched his face, where a scar pulled at his left eye. "Apache elder took me in, taught me to be warrior, but never truly belonged." He reached for a shirt and Maria helped him pull it on, mindful of his injury. "Army captain found me after battle. Offered food, then work. Said my size, my skills, useful. Said I could help prevent more bloodshed." He shrugged his good shoulder. "Sometimes true, sometimes lies. But you left them too," Maria observed, closing the healing salve pot. 10 years as scout. Learned much. Saved some lives. Took others." He looked around the cabin. "Built this place. Decided to scout no more. Live my own way." Maria sat across from him, sudden understanding dawning. "You are alone because you chose neither side." "Both sides chose not me," he corrected. "Too Apache for white men. Too white thinking for Apache." They fell silent as Maria absorbed this revelation. Here was a man who had never belonged anywhere, who had carved out his solitary existence between worlds that rejected him. Not so different from her own alienation as an orphan Spanish girl in Mexico, passed between families until sold northward. Takuna studied her face, seeming to read her thoughts. "Your healing ways," he said, gesturing to the salve pot. "Spanish. My grandmother taught me. She knew old ways from Spain, learned new plants here. Good medicine," he acknowledged. "Different from Apache ways, but good." He touched the pot tentatively. "Perhaps you teach me Spanish ways, I teach you Apache ways. Make stronger medicine together." The offer startled her. Not a command or expectation, but an invitation to exchange knowledge as equals. She looked at the small clay pot between them, now containing a mixture of their healing traditions. "I would like that," she said softly. That night, as Takuna finally succumbed to sleep, his fever broken by their combined medicines, Maria realized she was no longer looking for the first opportunity to flee. Something was taking root here, fragile as a spring seedling, unexpected as wildflowers after fire. As Takuna's wound healed, the rhythm of their days shifted. No longer was Maria a guest to be given space, nor he a distant protector. The raid had forced a closeness neither had anticipated. Each morning now, they shared the homestead's chores, feeding animals, tending the garden, preparing meals. A week after the attack, Takuna gestured for Maria to follow him to the cabin's table. He spread a piece of buckskin on the smooth wood surface, then began to draw with a charcoal stick. "Need to know land," he said as mountains, streams, and valleys took shape beneath his skilled hand. "For safety." The map he created showed the homestead at its center, with landmarks and distances marked in both Apache symbols and English words. He pointed to various locations, naming them in both languages. "Sezhin," he said, pointing to a small mountain. "Black Rock in English. Good place to see far." Maria repeated the Apache words carefully, earning a nod of approval. He continued, marking a series of caves, hidden springs, and trails. Some areas he outlined with darker lines. "No go alone," he indicated these regions. "Dangerous. hostile tribes, white settlers who shoot Indians. At the map's edge, he drew a small square. Trading post. French man married to Comanche woman. Good people. Safe place if trouble comes. He then traced an escape route from the homestead to a hidden canyon. If bad men come again, you go here. Water, shelter, food stored. Maria studied the map, committing it to memory. You expect more attacks? Takuna's face remained impassive, but his eyes held concern. Hope no. Expect yes. Man like me makes enemies. Apache who think I betray them. Whites who hate all Indians. Army who wants scout back. The next day, he took her on horseback to learn the actual terrain. The wilderness that had seemed uniform and threatening now revealed its distinct features as Takuna named each ridge and valley. He showed her how to find north without a compass, how to spot game trails, how to read the clouds for coming weather. At Black Rock, they dismounted and climbed to the summit. The view stole Maria's breath. Miles of rugged beauty stretching in all directions. The homestead a tiny haven in the vastness. Beautiful, she whispered. Naltsus, Takuna said, using the Apache word. Then, in Spanish, hermoso. The word in her native tongue startled a smile from her. Your Spanish is improving. Your Apache also, he acknowledged. Good to know many words. Many ways to see world. On their return journey, they encountered a settler's wagon struggling through a muddy patch of trail. The white family tensed visibly at Takuna's approach, the father reaching for his rifle. Keep riding, Maria suggested quietly. Takuna shook his head and approached slowly, hands visible. Need help? He called in English. The settler kept his rifle ready. Don't need no Indian help. We'll stuck. Horse tired. Will be dark soon. Takuna pointed to the clouds. Rain coming. The man's wife whispered something, eyes darting between Takuna, Maria, and their children in the wagon. Finally, the man lowered his rifle slightly. You pull us out, then move on. No trouble. Without a word, Takuna dismounted and put his massive strength into freeing the wagon. When it was done, he stepped back, making no request for thanks. As they rode away, Maria noted the confused expressions on the settlers' faces. They expected a savage, she observed. Most do, he replied simply. That evening, as they added details to the map from their journey, Maria realized how differently she now saw this land. No longer as an alien wilderness, but as a place of names and meanings, dangers and refuges. Takuna's patient teaching had begun to give her something she'd lost long ago, a sense of belonging to a place. She traced the route they'd traveled that day, her finger lingering on the hidden canyon he'd shown her. This place, she said quietly. It could hide two people, not just one. Takuna's hand paused in its drawing. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, but his voice was soft when he answered. Yes, room enough for two. 2 weeks later, supplies ran low enough to necessitate a journey to the trading post. Maria noticed Takuna's unusual care in preparing for the trip, cleaning his best shirt, checking and rechecking their trade goods, even taking extra time braiding his long hair. Important journey? She asked, curious about his meticulousness. First time you come to trading post, he replied. First time people see. He paused, seeming to search for the right word. See us together. The implication hung in the air between them. Until now, their growing companionship had existed in isolation. Public appearance would bring scrutiny, assumptions, judgments. They departed at dawn, Maria wearing a dress adapted from Takuna's sister's clothing. The journey took most of the day, following game trails and shallow stream beds rather than main routes. Safer this way, Takuna explained. Fewer bad men. The trading post appeared suddenly around a bend, a sturdy log building with a corral and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney, and 2 wagons stood outside. Takuna tensed slightly at the sight of the wagons but continued forward. Inside, the trading post was a marvel of frontier commerce. Shelves lined with goods from east and west, tools, fabric, medicines, ammunition, preserved foods, while furs, crafts, and local goods filled other spaces. Behind the counter stood a bearded man with a French accent and a striking Comanche woman working alongside him. "Takuna," the Frenchman called warmly. "Long time, my friend." "Henri," Takuna nodded. "Nantai," he acknowledged the woman in Comanche. Their gazes shifted to Maria, curiosity evident. Henry's eyebrows rose slightly, while Nantai's expression remained carefully neutral. "This is Maria," Takuna said simply. Henri extended his hand to her with genuine warmth. "Welcome, mademoiselle. Any friend of Takuna's is welcome here." Nantai studied her more carefully before offering a slight nod. "You live at the tall man's cabin?" she asked directly. "Yes," Maria answered, feeling the weight of the question. The conversation might have continued, but the trading post door opened, admitting 3 white settlers. Their jovial conversation died abruptly at the sight of Takuna's imposing figure. One man's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. "Gentlemen," Henri said firmly, "all are welcome to trade in peace here." Tension thickened the air as the settlers moved to one side of the store, keeping wary eyes on Takuna. Maria felt their stares shift to her, followed by muttered comments she could only partially hear. "With an Injun," and "Mexican woman." Takuna ignored them, conducting his business with Henri efficiently, trading furs and carved items for flour, coffee, ammunition, and tools. Maria examined fabric bolts nearby, aware of the settlers' continued scrutiny. When Nantai approached with a selection of sewing supplies, their conversation turned to women's matters: what herbs grew near the homestead, how to preserve summer fruits for winter, which fabrics lasted longest in the harsh environment. The normality of their exchange seemed to confuse the watching settlers. As they concluded their trading, Henri pressed a small package into Takuna's hand. "A gift," he said quietly, "for the lady." Outside, loading their supplies, Takuna finally handed her the small paper-wrapped package. Inside lay a silver hair clasp, simple but elegantly crafted. "Henri says is Spanish style," he explained, a hint of uncertainty in his usually confident voice. Maria touched the silver piece with wonder. It was the first gift she had received in years, and certainly the first from a man that came without expectations attached. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Takuna nodded, relief visible in his eyes. As he secured their supplies, the settlers emerged from the trading post, still muttering among themselves. One spat on the ground near Takuna's horse. "Injun lover," he said loudly enough for Maria to hear. Takuna went still, only his eyes betraying the rage that flashed through him. Maria feared violence would erupt, but he simply finished his task and mounted his horse. "We go," he said quietly. They rode in silence until well away from the trading post. Finally, Maria asked, "Does it always happen? That hatred?" "Often," he replied. "Sometimes worse." She touched the silver clasp, now securing her hair. "Thank you for the gift, for not fighting." "Fighting easy," he said. "Living harder." After a pause, he added, "But worth doing." As they continued homeward, Maria realized she had thought of the cabin as home, a slip that revealed how much had changed within her. The silver clasp caught the setting sun, a small brightness against the darkening trail ahead. Autumn painted the landscape in russet and gold as the days grew shorter. With evening's early arrival came a new ritual. After supper, Takuna would build up the hearth fire and unfold a special blanket, its geometric patterns telling Apache stories in woven form. On this storytelling blanket, they began to share the histories that had shaped them. Tonight, as wind rattled the cabin's sturdy walls, Maria traced the angular patterns on the blanket's edge. "Who taught you to weave these designs?" "My mother," Takuna replied, his deep voice softening at the memory. "She was known for her weaving skill. Will you tell me about her? Your family?" Maria asked, then quickly added, "Only if you wish to." Takuna was silent so long she thought he might refuse. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, as if excavated from deep burial. "My mother was called Nehemina, mystic in your tongue. Small woman but strong spirit. Father was Heliku, son dreamer. He hunted, traded with other tribes. His large hand smoothed the blanket gently. Had sister Talyuta. She was 10 summers when I was 8. What happened to them? Maria asked softly. Comanche raid. Summer of great drought. Came for horses, food. I was gathering firewood. His face remained stoic, but his eyes reflected ancient pain. Returned to find them gone. Father, mother, sister. All taken to the afterlife. You were just a child, Maria whispered. 8 summers. Too young to be warrior. Too old to cry. He stared into the fire. Elder named Makya took me in. Taught me to fight, to track, to survive. Said my size was gift from ancestors. Trained me hard. And no one else? No other family. Apache way is all tribe is family. But, he hesitated. I was different. Too big. Too angry. Some feared me. Children called me taller than trees monster. The revelation struck Maria deeply. This formidable man had once been a lonely, grieving child, marked as different, carrying the weight of his lost family. What of you? He asked, turning the conversation. Your people. Maria clasped her hands, finding herself unexpectedly willing to share what she normally kept guarded. My father was a minor Spanish nobleman who came to Mexico seeking fortune. He married my mother, daughter of a local landowner with Spanish blood. They died of fever when I was 12. No other family? An uncle took me in. Not kindly. Her voice tightened. When I refused to marry his gambling partner, a man older than my father, he sold me to settle debts. I was passed between owners until the merchant who brought me north died on the journey. Takuna's expression darkened. Men who sell women deserve no honor. In your tribe, she asked hesitantly, how do men and women come together? With respect, he answered. Woman has choice. Man proves worth through actions, not ownership. He added softly, Apache man gives gifts to woman's family, shows he can provide. But woman decides. The concept seemed foreign yet beautiful to Maria. Choice, decision, agency. And your sister's things? She ventured. Why did you keep them? Pain flickered across his features. She was to marry, had prepared all a woman needs for new home. Then smallpox came to agency where she worked. Many died. His voice roughened. Could not bury her in Apache way. White doctor said bodies must be burned. Maria reached across the blanket, briefly touching his hand in a gesture of comfort. I'm sorry. He nodded, accepting her sympathy. Then, perhaps to lighten the heaviness of memory, he began teaching her an Apache children's song about animals preparing for winter. His deep voice carried the simple tune, while Maria tried to master the unfamiliar words, their laughter at her mistakes filling the cabin with unexpected warmth. Later, as Maria prepared for sleep, she found herself humming the Apache melody. The silver clasp caught firelight as she removed it from her hair. These evening exchanges had begun to weave them together like the patterns on Takuna's blanket, distinct threads creating something neither could have crafted alone. She realized, with a start, that for the first time in years, she had spoken of her past without the crushing weight of its sorrows. Somehow, sharing burdens with someone who truly listened had made them lighter for them both. Winter announced itself with no gentle introduction. One morning they woke to find the world transformed. Everything blanketed in snow, the familiar landscape rendered strange and new. Takuna spent the day teaching Maria winter survival skills. How to move through deep snow, find food when everything seemed barren, keep extremities from freezing. Winter here different than Mexico, he observed as they reinforced the barn. In my village, winters were mild. Maria agreed, her breath clouding the air. This is beautiful but frightening. Respect winter, Takuna advised. Beauty that kills. Their preparations took on urgency as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. By nightfall, wind howled around the cabin like hungry wolves. Takuna added extra logs to the fire, his expression concerned as he listened to the storm's growing fury. Blizzard comes, he said. Bad one. The storm lasted 3 days, snow piling against the cabin until the windows were half covered. Inside, they conserved firewood, sharing the main room rather than heating separate spaces. Takuna hung extra blankets to create a smaller area around the hearth, preserving precious warmth. On the second night, as temperatures plummeted further, he retrieved a special woven shawl from a cedar chest, larger and finer than the everyday blankets, with intricate patterns in deep blues and rich earth tones. "Winter ceremonial shawl," he explained, wrapping it around Maria's shoulders. "Very warm, very old." The gesture surprised her. Such an item was clearly precious, likely an heirloom. "I can't take this," she protested. "Not taking, sharing." He adjusted it to cover her better. "Tonight you need more than I." The third day brought the storm's peak. Wind shrieked and battered the cabin until Maria feared the roof might tear away. Without discussion, they sat close together beneath the ceremonial shawl, the shared warmth a necessity for survival. Takuna taught her Apache winter stories to distract from the storm's fury. Tales of Old Man Winter and his daughter Snow Girl, of rabbits who stole fire, of bears who dreamed the world into existence. "How do your people survive such storms when living in teepees?" Maria asked. "Teepees stronger than look," he explained. "But winter camp different. Find sheltered valleys, build brush windbreaks. Some bands have winter lodges. More like this cabin." As night fell and the storm intensified, Maria found herself leaning against Takuna's solid warmth, her fear of the howling blizzard greater than her usual caution around him. His arm eventually came around her shoulders, the gesture protective rather than possessive. "We will be fine," he assured her. "Cabin strong, food enough, firewood plenty." In the firelight, with the storm raging outside, the barriers between them seemed as insubstantial as smoke. This was no longer a man who had purchased her, nor she a woman under his protection. They were simply two souls taking comfort in each other's presence while winter raged. Dawn of the fourth day brought silence. The storm had passed, leaving a transformed world behind. They opened the door to find snow piled higher than Maria's head, the path to the barn completely buried. Takuna began the laborious process of digging out, his massive strength making steady progress where an ordinary man might have faltered. Working alongside him, Maria marveled at how different he looked with snow dusting his black hair, how his normally stern face brightened when he showed her how to identify animal tracks in the fresh powder. The isolation imposed by the blizzard had changed something between them, created an easy companionship that hadn't existed before. That evening, as they hung wet clothes to dry by the fire, Takuna paused in his task. "Storm changed trails. Must teach you new safe paths when snow settles." "You still plan for me to leave?" Maria asked, surprised by her own disappointment at the thought. His dark eyes studied her face. "You wish to go?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Maria touched the ceremonial shawl, still draped across a chair where they had left it. "Not yet," she answered softly. "Not while winter holds the land." Takuna nodded, something easing in his expression. "Then we prepare for long winter together." The shared shawl remained in the main room, no longer returned to the cedar chest. A silent acknowledgement that some boundaries, like the paths buried beneath the snow, had been irrevocably altered. Winter's grip loosened gradually, snow retreating to reveal mud and then tentative green shoots. With the changing season came new activities: preparing garden soil, repairing winter damage to outbuildings, hunting spring game. The homestead, which had felt confining during the long winter months, now bustled with shared purpose. One morning, Takuna presented Maria with two carved wooden implements, traditional Apache planting sticks, one sized for his massive hands, the other crafted perfectly for hers. "For garden," he explained, demonstrating how they were used to create holes for seeds. "Better than metal tools. Feel the earth." Maria ran her fingers over the smooth wood, noting the careful craftsmanship. "When did you make these?" "Winter nights," he replied. "While you slept." They worked side by side in the freshly thawed earth, Takuna showing her traditional Apache planting patterns: corn, beans, and squash growing together in harmonious groupings. 3 sisters, he explained. Corn grows tall, beans climb corn, squash covers ground. All help each other. Maria added rows for herbs and vegetables from her Spanish heritage, marking sections with stones. The garden expanded beyond previous year's boundaries, neither of them acknowledging what it signified, preparation for feeding 2 through another year's cycle. As they worked, Maria found herself singing Spanish folk songs her mother had taught her. Occasionally, Takuna would ask for a word's meaning, adding it to his growing Spanish vocabulary. The easy exchange felt natural now, their initial wariness long faded. One afternoon, while teaching Maria to ride properly, not just to sit on a horse but to communicate with it as an Apache would, Takuna received an unexpected visitor. A young Apache man arrived, his manner respectful but urgent. They spoke rapidly in their native tongue, the conversation too complex for Maria to follow. When the messenger departed, Takuna's expression was troubled. "What news?" Maria asked as they walked back to the cabin. "Trouble between white soldiers and Apache bands. Army captain asks me to come. Help talk peace." His jaw tightened. "Not first time. Maybe not work. But you'll go?" she asked, trying to keep worry from her voice. "Must try. Prevent bloodshed." That evening, as Takuna prepared his gear for the journey, Maria moved about the cabin with unusual energy, rearranging items, sweeping already clean floors, avoiding his eyes. 3 days. Ride, he said finally. Gone perhaps 10 days. "I will tend things here," she replied, her voice carefully controlled. Takuna paused in his preparations, watching her. "You are concerned. These peace talks," she said, finally meeting his gaze. "Are they dangerous?" "Can be," he admitted. "Some Apache angry at me, see me as traitor. Some soldiers not want peace, just want Apache land." "Then why go?" The question burst from her with unexpected force. "Because must try," he said simply. "Few people can speak to both sides." Maria turned away, surprising herself with the depth of her reaction. The prospect of his departure awakened fears she hadn't realized existed. Fear for his safety. Fear of being alone again. Fear of losing this unexpected companionship that had become precious to her. "I will return," Takuna said, his deep voice gentle behind her. "You cannot promise that," she whispered. He moved to stand before her, his height making him bend slightly to meet her eyes. "I promise to try, with all my strength, all my skill." Their gazes held, the moment charged with words unsaid. Maria found herself reaching up to touch the scar that ran along his cheek, a gesture she would never have dared months before. "Be cautious," she said softly. "This place needs you to return." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, followed by a warmth she rarely saw there. His large hand engulfed hers briefly. "You will be here?" "When I return." The question contained layers of meaning that neither had directly addressed before now. Maria thought of the garden they had planted together, the planting sticks crafted specifically for their paired use, the homestead that no longer felt like temporary shelter. "Yes," she answered. "I will be here." The promise hung between them, as significant as any formal vow. Before dawn the next morning, Takuna departed, the sound of his horse's hoofbeats fading into the awakening day. Maria stood in the doorway long after he disappeared from view, one hand holding the planting stick he'd made for her, the other pressed against the doorframe of what she now, unquestionably, thought of as home. 6 days after Takuna's departure, Maria was working in the garden when she heard approaching horses. Her heart leapt. Too soon for Takuna's return. She dropped her tools and hurried inside for the rifle he'd taught her to use. From the cabin window, she watched a cavalry patrol emerge from the tree line. 8 mounted soldiers led by an officer. Their appearance was orderly, not the chaotic approach of raiders, but Maria remained wary. She positioned herself on the porch, rifle visible but not aimed. "Hello, the house," called the officer, raising his hand in greeting. He was perhaps 40, with a neatly trimmed beard streaked with gray and an air of authority. "We seek Takuna, Apache scout." "He's not here," Maria answered in careful English. The officer studied her with obvious surprise. He dismounted and approached, stopping at a respectful distance. "I am Captain Thomas Harrington, United States Cavalry. And you are?" "Maria," she replied, offering no surname. "You're Spanish," he observed, his eyes taking in her features. Her clothing, a blend of her original dress and adaptations using Apache designs. "Are you here of your own accord, ma'am?" The question's implication stung. "Yes," she said firmly. "This is my home." Captain Harrington's eyebrows rose slightly. "May we water our horses? We've ridden far seeking Takuna." Maria hesitated, then nodded, keeping the rifle ready as the soldiers led their mounts to the creek. The captain remained, his gaze sweeping the well-maintained homestead. "I know Takuna," he said. "Served with him for 3 years. Best scout I ever worked with." "He's gone to peace talks," Maria explained, "between your army and the Apache bands. That's why we're looking for him. The situation has deteriorated." Harrington sighed. "May I speak with you frankly, Miss Maria?" She nodded cautiously. "I'm concerned for your welfare. If you were brought here against your will or wish to leave, I can provide escort to the nearest settlement." "I am here by choice," Maria said, her voice strengthening. "Takuna has shown nothing but respect and protection." The captain seemed genuinely puzzled. "You understand he's Apache? There are few white women who would choose." "I am not white," Maria interrupted. "I am Spanish, and I choose to be here." Harrington studied her, his expression shifting from concern to curiosity. "Your Spanish is educated, your bearing refined. You're not a common frontier woman, are you?" Maria tensed. Something in his scrutiny unsettled her. "What is your full name?" he pressed. "That doesn't matter now." The captain reached into his saddlebag and withdrew an official-looking document. "I ask because you resemble someone described in this letter. A Spanish lady of noble birth, believed lost at sea 2 years ago. Maria Luisa Esperanza de Montoya y Castillo." The name hit Maria like a physical blow. Her birth name, unused for years. The rifle wavered in her hands. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. "Your uncle, Don Francisco de Montoya, is a Spanish diplomat currently in Washington. He's offered a substantial reward for information about his missing niece." Harrington watched her reaction closely. A niece who was to be married to a Spanish official before she disappeared during a shipwreck off the Mexican coast. Maria's mind raced. Her uncle, the same man who had sold her to settle gambling debts, now presenting himself as a concerned guardian? The deception was as breathtaking as it was dangerous. "That woman died in the shipwreck," she said firmly. "Did she?" Harrington asked quietly. "Or did she seize an opportunity to escape an unwanted marriage?" Maria's silence was answer enough. "Your uncle has considerable influence," the captain continued. "When I return to Fort Defiance, I'm obligated to report finding a Spanish woman living with an Apache scout. And if that woman asks you not to, I would need compelling reasons to withhold such information." Harrington replied carefully, "particularly when the lady in question might be under duress or influence." "I am under no one's influence," Maria said, anger coloring her words. "My uncle sold me to settle his debts. The shipwreck was my salvation, my chance at freedom." The captain's expression registered shock. "That's a serious accusation against a respected diplomat." "It is the truth." A soldier approached, reporting the horses were watered. Harrington nodded, then turned back to Maria. "We'll camp at the creek tonight and continue our search for Takuna tomorrow." His voice softened. "I have no desire to cause difficulty for a lady, whatever her circumstances. But this situation is unusual." As the soldiers established their camp, Maria retreated inside, the military letter clutched in her hand. Her past, which she had believed safely buried, now threatened everything she had built with Takuna. If her uncle learned she was alive and living with an Apache warrior, he would stop at nothing to reclaim his property and preserve his reputation. And Takuna was days away, unaware of the danger rapidly closing around them. Night fell with Maria standing vigil at the cabin window, watching the soldiers' campfire flicker in the distance. Sleep eluded her as she grappled with the resurrection of a past she had believed drowned in the Pacific. When dawn broke, she heard the cavalry patrol preparing to depart. Captain Harrington approached the cabin alone. "We're continuing to the peace talks," he informed her. "I've made no decision yet about what to report regarding your situation." After they left, Maria paced the cabin, anxiety driving her to constant motion. She found herself at the wooden chest in her room, kneeling to unlock it with trembling hands. Beneath folded clothing lay a small object wrapped in faded silk, her hidden medallion, the last remnant of her true identity. The gold gleamed as she unwrapped it. The Montoya family crest, an heirloom passed through generations of Spanish nobility. She had kept it when she discarded everything else from her old life, unable to part with this final connection to her parents. 2 days later, Takuna returned. She heard his horse approaching and ran outside, relief flooding her at the sight of him. Unharmed, though visibly weary. His eyes brightened seeing her, but quickly sharpened with concern at her troubled expression. "What happened?" he asked, dismounting. Inside, she told him everything. The captain's visit, the revelation of her identity, the threat of her uncle's search. Takuna listened silently, his face unreadable until she finished. "I should have told you before," she said, placing the medallion on the table between them. "Who I truly was." Takuna picked up the medallion, examining the crest. "Why didn't you?" "At first, because I didn't trust you. Later." She hesitated. "Later, I feared it would change how you saw me." "How would it change?" "I was born to privilege, Takuna. My family owned vast lands in Spain, had servants, wealth. I was educated by private tutors, trained in arts most frontier women never learn." She looked down. "I feared you would see me as one of them, the Europeans who took your people's lands." "You are not your ancestors," he said simply. "Just as I am not mine." Maria took a deep breath. "There's more. The arranged marriage my uncle planned, it was to a Spanish official named Diego Alvarez. A powerful man, cruel in private but charming in public. My uncle owed him debts, and I was to be payment." She recounted the desperate plan hatched with a sympathetic lady's maid during the sea journey to meet her intended husband. When their ship encountered a fierce storm, she seized the opportunity. "When the ship began taking water, I didn't go to the lifeboats. I hid, then slipped away in the chaos. The maid told others she saw me washed overboard." Her voice tightened. "I let them believe I was dead." "You chose freedom," Takuna observed. "Yes, I made my way inland, working as a seamstress, a cook, whatever would feed me. But my Spanish accent marked me as different. Eventually, I was recognized by one of my uncle's business associates." Her hands clenched. "He sold me to another man, and so began my journey north, passed from owner to owner until the market," Takuna finished, "where I found you. If my uncle discovers I'm alive and living with an Apache, he would rather see me dead than have his reputation tarnished. And this Captain Harrington has the power to expose me." Takuna was silent for a long moment, his expression troubled. Finally, he asked, "Do you wish to reclaim your old life? Your title, your lands?" The question startled her. "No, I escaped that cage once. I would never willingly return." "Then what do you want, Maria?" His dark eyes studied her intently. "Not what you fear, not what you run from. What do you want?" The directness of his question stripped away pretense. Maria looked around the cabin. At the home they had built together, at the life that had grown between them like spring flowers after long winter. "This," she said softly, "a life of my own choosing. Freedom to decide my path." She met his gaze directly. "With you, if you would have me stay." Takuna's expression softened in a way she rarely witnessed. He reached across the table, his large hand gently covering hers. "Then we find way to keep you free," he promised. Together. The medallion gleamed between them, no longer a buried secret but a shared truth. Whatever came next, They would face it with the strength of complete honesty between them. Dawn found them preparing for a journey neither had anticipated. After a night of discussion, they had reached the only conclusion that offered hope. They must reach Santa Fe before word of Maria's existence could travel from Fort Defiance to her uncle's associates. Judge Wilkins, Takuna explained as he packed supplies into a journey bundle. Fair man. Helped Apache people when others wouldn't. If anyone will recognize your right to choose your own life, it's him. Maria nodded, carefully wrapping. Dried food in cloth. But will he stand against a Spanish diplomat's influence? We must try, Takuna replied. Better to act than wait for others to decide our fate. They worked methodically, packing only essentials, food, weapons, trading goods, and documents Takuna had kept from his scouting days that proved his service to the army. Maria sewed her medallion into a hidden pocket in her dress. Whatever happened in Santa Fe, she would not lose this last connection to her true family. As they secured the homestead for their absence, Maria felt a pang of fear. What if we can't return? Takuna paused in his work. Home is not just place, he said. Apache know this. Sometimes must leave place, but keep home here. He touched his chest. We build again if needed. His certainty steadied her. This man had rebuilt his life multiple times, had found ways to survive in a world that offered him no easy place. If anyone could navigate this dangerous path, it was Takuna. They departed as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, taking a route Takuna said would avoid main trails where soldiers or bounty hunters might travel. The journey bundle, securely tied behind Maria's saddle, represented all they needed for this uncertain venture, a physical manifestation of their commitment to fighting for a future together. 3 days to Santa Fe, Takuna estimated. If weather holds. The first day passed uneventfully, miles disappearing beneath their horses' hooves as they traveled through landscapes of startling beauty. Takuna pointed out landmarks with their Apache names, continuing their tradition of language exchange even in this tense circumstance. They camped that night in a sheltered hollow, a small fire their only comfort against the spring chill. As they ate a simple meal, Maria found herself studying Takuna's profile in the firelight. What will happen in Santa Fe? She asked. An Apache and a Spanish woman seeking legal recognition. Will anyone even listen? Judge Wilkins will listen, Takuna said with quiet confidence. After that, he shrugged. We face what comes. Have you ever been afraid? The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Takuna was silent for a long moment. Yes, he finally answered. Not of dying, of living wrong life, of betraying who I am. And now, his dark eyes met hers across the fire. Now afraid of losing what matters. The simple statement contained depths of meaning that neither needed to elaborate. Their journey was about more than legal documents or escaping her uncle's reach. It was about claiming the right to choose their own path together. The second day brought them to more populated areas, requiring greater caution. They skirted a small settlement where curious eyes followed their passage. A towering Apache warrior and a Spanish woman riding as companions rather than captor and captive. They stare, Maria observed. People fear what they don't understand, Takuna replied. What doesn't fit their world? And we don't fit, she said softly. No, he agreed. We make new space that does fit. That night, camped in a grove of cottonwoods, tension grew as Santa Fe drew nearer. Tomorrow they would enter the city and discover whether their gamble would succeed or fail spectacularly. If Judge Wilkins cannot help, Maria ventured. If my uncle's influence is too great, then we go elsewhere, Takuna interrupted gently. North, Canada maybe, or west to California. Many places where people can disappear, start new. The fact that he was willing to leave the land of his ancestors, the only home he had ever known, to ensure her freedom moved Maria deeply. Without thinking, she crossed to his side of the fire and took his hand in hers. Whatever happens tomorrow, she said softly, I want you to know I've never regretted the day you bought me at that market. Takuna's fingers tightened around hers. Was best trade I ever made. In the dancing shadows of their campfire, with Santa Fe and unknown challenges waiting beyond tomorrow's horizon, They found a moment of perfect understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it not as protector and protected, not as buyer and bought, but as two people who had chosen each other against all odds. Santa Fe rose before them like a mirage. Adobe buildings glowing golden in morning light, church spires reaching skyward, the territorial governor's palace commanding the central plaza. Despite its modest size compared to Mexico City or Madrid, the territorial capital represented civilization, law, and potential salvation or capture. "Stay close," Takuna murmured as they rode through the outskirts. Eyes followed them, a giant Apache warrior and a Spanish lady, an impossible pairing that drew stares ranging from curious to hostile. They stabled their horses at a livery run by a weathered man who recognized Takuna with a nod. "Back again, big man? Been some years." "Need to see Judge Wilkins," Takuna replied. "Still at Old Courthouse?" Still dispensing what passes for justice." The man glanced at Maria. "Lady with you?" "Yes," Takuna answered simply, offering no explanation. They made their way through bustling streets, Maria keenly aware of how they appeared. Her dress a strange hybrid of Spanish and frontier styles, Takuna's imposing presence causing pedestrians to step aside. She kept her head high, refusing to shrink beneath the scrutiny. The courthouse stood on a side street, a simple adobe structure with heavy wooden doors. Inside, a clerk looked up from his papers, his expression shifting from boredom to surprise. "We seek Judge Wilkins," Takuna stated. The clerk hesitated. "The judge is in chambers. He doesn't typically receive visitors without appointment. Tell him Takuna, former Army scout, requests audience. Urgent matter." While the clerk disappeared through a rear door, Maria studied the room, its worn benches, territorial law books, and posted notices. This humble space would determine their future. Minutes later, a door opened to reveal a tall, gaunt man with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes. Judge Emmett Wilkins had aged since Takuna last saw him, but his sharp gaze remained unchanged. "Takuna," he said, voice gravelly from years of trail dust and tobacco. "Didn't expect to see you again." His attention shifted to Maria, assessment in his eyes. "And who might this lady be?" "My name is Maria," she answered in her most proper English. "I seek your assistance in a matter of legal identity." The judge studied them both before nodding. "Come into my chambers." Inside the private office, they presented their case. Maria recounting her history, the shipwreck, her journey north, and finally the threat posed by her uncle's search. Takuna added details of Captain Harrington's visit and their concern that word would soon reach Spanish authorities. "What you're asking," Judge Wilkins said slowly, "is for me to create legal documentation declaring you a different person than your birth." "I ask for documentation of who I have chosen to be," Maria clarified. "The woman my uncle seeks is dead. She died in that shipwreck 2 years ago." The judge steepled his fingers. "And your relationship with Takuna? What precisely is that?" Maria felt heat rise in her cheeks but met his gaze directly. "He purchased me to save me from worse fate. He has treated me with nothing but respect. And now," she glanced at Takuna, "now we wish to build a life together." Judge Wilkins raised an eyebrow. "A Spanish noblewoman and an Apache warrior? Do you understand the challenges such a union would face?" "We have faced many already," Takuna replied. The judge nodded thoughtfully, then pulled a blank document from his desk. "I can create a declaration establishing your identity as simply Maria, a free woman of Spanish descent, with no connection to the Montoya family." He began writing. "It won't stop your uncle if he finds you, but it will give you legal standing should questions arise." Relief flooded through Maria as she watched the quill move across parchment. Takuna stood silently beside her, his presence a reassurance. The courthouse door burst open, voices raised in the outer room. The clerk appeared at the chamber door, his face pale. "Judge Wilkins, forgive the interruption. There's a gentleman here, a Spanish diplomatic envoy with military escort. He's demanding to see you immediately about a matter of international importance." Maria's blood turned to ice. How had they been found so quickly? The judge's eyes narrowed. Is Captain Harrington among the escort? Yes, sir. Maria looked at the unfinished declaration on the desk, their hope half completed. They've come for me, she whispered. Judge Wilkins made a swift decision. Baker, he addressed the clerk. Tell them I'm concluding an important case and will be available shortly. Once the clerk left, he turned to them. I need a few minutes to complete this. When I call you back, be prepared to make your case publicly. The law respects documentation, but it also responds to power and influence. As they stepped into an antechamber, Maria clutched the unfinished declaration, their fragile shield against the forces gathering outside. Takuna's expression was grim but determined as they heard the authoritative voice of a Spanish-accented man filling the courthouse, demanding immediate attention. The courthouse had filled with spectators drawn by the commotion. Judge Wilkins sat at his bench, face impassive as he surveyed the assembled parties. To one side stood the Spanish envoy, a thin, elegantly dressed man with cold eyes, flanked by Captain Harrington and 2 soldiers. Opposite them, Takuna towered protectively near Maria, his expression stoic but his body tense like a mountain lion ready to spring. This court is now in session, Judge Wilkins announced, silencing the murmurs. We have before us an unusual case concerning the identity and status of this woman. He gestured to Maria. The Spanish envoy stepped forward. Your Honor, there is no case to hear. This woman is Maria Luisa Esperanza de Montoya y Castillo, niece of Don Francisco de Montoya, Spanish diplomatic envoy to the United States. She disappeared, presumed drowned, 2 years ago. Her uncle has been searching tirelessly since learning she might have survived. And how did Don Francisco learn this? Judge Wilkins inquired. Captain Harrington shifted uncomfortably. I sent word after encountering her at the homestead of Takuna, a former army scout. Kidnapped, no doubt, the envoy interjected smoothly. Held captive by this savage. Takuna's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. Judge Wilkins turned to Maria. Is this your identity, ma'am? Maria stepped forward, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart. I was born with that name, Your Honor, but that woman died in the Pacific Ocean 2 years ago. I am simply Maria now, by my own choice. Choice? The envoy scoffed. A lady of noble Spanish blood choosing to live with an Apache? Preposterous. She has clearly been coerced or her mind affected by her ordeal. My mind is perfectly sound, Maria replied, heat entering her voice. And I was not kidnapped by Takuna. He purchased me at a frontier market to save me from a crueler fate after I had been sold multiple times since my supposed death. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Sold? Judge Wilkins pressed. How did a Spanish noblewoman come to be sold on the frontier? Maria took a deep breath. After surviving the shipwreck, I chose to remain dead, rather than return to Spain and a forced marriage arranged by my uncle. A marriage that would have given my hand to a man known for cruelty, a man to whom my uncle owed substantial gambling debts. The envoy's face flushed with anger. These are libelous accusations against one of Spain's most respected diplomats. They are the truth, Maria countered. I worked my way inland, but was eventually recognized by one of my uncle's associates who sold me to settle his own debts to my uncle. From there, I was passed between owners until falling ill on the journey north. When the merchant who owned me died, I was put up for auction. Captain Harrington stepped forward. Your Honor, regardless of how she came to be in her current situation, Dona Maria is a Spanish noblewoman with considerable property and status. Her rightful place is with her family and her intended husband. My rightful place, Maria said firmly, is where I choose it to be. Judge Wilkins studied her. And where do you choose it to be, Maria? Without hesitation, she moved to stand beside Takuna. Here, with the man who bought me to set me free, who has shown me nothing but respect and kindness, who sees me as a person, not property or a political pawn. The Spanish envoy's face contorted with disgust. This is an outrage. You would allow a lady of noble birth to throw herself away on an Indian? Think of the diplomatic implications. I'm thinking of the legal implications, Judge Wilkins replied evenly. In this territory, adults of sound mind may choose their own path. She is Spanish property, the envoy declared, subject to Spanish law and her guardian's authority. I am no one's property, Maria said, her voice rising with conviction. Not Spain's, not my uncle's, not even Takuna's, though he had more right than most, having actually paid for me. The envoy turned to Captain Harrington. Captain, I demand you take this woman into custody immediately. She is being returned to her uncle's protection by order of the Spanish crown. Before Harrington could respond, Takuna spoke for the first time, his deep voice filling the courtroom. Maria stays only if Maria wishes to stay. Judge Wilkins held up the declaration he had completed. I have here documentation establishing this woman's identity as simply Maria, a free woman of Spanish descent, with all rights thereto. He fixed the envoy with a stern gaze. Unless you can prove she is being held against her will, which her own testimony contradicts, she is free to choose her own path under territorial law. In a gesture that silenced the room, Takuna reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple ring carved from dark wood. Without words, he offered it to Maria, the question in his eyes clear to all watching. Maria took the ring and placed it on her finger, a single tear trailing down her cheek as she faced the judge, the envoy, and the assembled crowd. This is my choice, she declared. This man, this life, this freedom. They departed Santa Fe as the afternoon shadows lengthened, riding swiftly despite their exhaustion. The Spanish envoy's threats still rang in their ears, promises of continued pursuit, of diplomatic pressure, of consequences. Only Judge Wilkins's firm stance and Captain Harrington's surprising intervention had prevented immediate disaster. I cannot disobey direct orders, Harrington had told the envoy, but neither can I remove a free woman against her will without proper territorial authorization, which Judge Wilkins has explicitly denied. The standoff had ended in an uneasy truce, with the Spanish envoy retreating to seek further instructions from Washington. It was the opening Takuna and Maria needed to escape. He will try again, Maria said as they made camp that first night, far from the main trails. My uncle is not a man who accepts defeat. We have time now, Takuna replied, and legal paper, more than we had yesterday. He carefully stored the declaration Judge Wilkins had given them, the document that formally recognized Maria as a free woman with no legal connection to the Montoya family. It wasn't perfect protection, but it created a barrier against the most direct attempts to reclaim her. The journey homeward felt different than their anxious travel to Santa Fe. Despite the lingering threat, something fundamental had shifted. Each night as they made camp, Takuna would take Maria's hand, his thumb brushing over the wooden ring he had carved for her. Did not plan to give this in courtroom, he admitted on the second night. Made it during winter nights. Waited for right moment. Maria studied the ring's intricate design, a continuous pattern of flowing lines that reminded her of the storytelling blanket's border. It's beautiful, she said softly. What does the pattern mean? Two paths becoming one, he explained. Apache symbol for journey taken together. On the third day, they encountered an elderly Navajo couple traveling with a small trading caravan. After cautious introductions, the couple invited them to share their evening fire. The woman, named Dolly, noticed Maria's wooden ring immediately. You are joined? She asked in halting Spanish. Yes, Maria answered, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Dolly disappeared into her wagon and returned with a carefully folded blanket, its pattern more geometric than Apache designs, in rich blues and earthen reds. Marriage blanket, she explained, presenting it to them. Man and woman stand beneath, become one spirit. That night, after the traders continued on their way, Takuna unfolded the gifted blanket. Without words, he held it up, creating a small shelter beneath the stars. Maria joined him underneath, their faces close in the intimate space. In Apache way, he explained softly. No ceremony needed. Man and woman decide, families witness, it is done. And what of a woman with no family? Maria asked. She chooses family of her heart, he replied. Under that blanket, With only the stars as witnesses, they spoke words of commitment in 3 languages: Apache, Spanish, and English, creating a promise as unique as their union. The sight of their homestead on the 4th day brought unexpected emotion to Maria's throat. What had once been simply Takuna's cabin had transformed in her mind and heart to their home. The garden they'd planted together had sprouted in their absence, green shoots reaching toward the sun with persistent hope. As they approached, Maria noticed something unusual: items placed near the cabin door. Investigating, they found gifts left by their few allies: smoked meat from Henri and Nantai at the trading post, a basket of cornmeal from Takuna's Apache contacts, even a small carved horse that could only have come from the Navajo traders who had somehow arrived. Before them, "They honor our joining," Takuna explained, surprise evident in his voice. "We're not as alone as we thought," Maria realized, touching each gift with wonder. That evening, they hung the marriage blanket on the cabin wall, its colors brightening the space and symbolizing the unexpected community that had acknowledged their union when both their original worlds had rejected them. As darkness fell, they stood in the doorway looking out at the land that had brought them together. Maria twisted the wooden ring on her finger, still adjusting to its presence. "What now?" she asked softly. Takuna's arm came around her shoulders, strong and sure. "Now we live," he said simply. "One day at a time. Together." The word held all the promise she needed. Together they had defied expectations, crossed boundaries, and created something entirely new. A life of their own making point. 1 year passed, then another. The feared pursuit from Spanish authorities never materialized in force, perhaps due to Judge Wilkins's influence or Captain Harrington's reluctance to enforce what he had come to see as an unjust claim. Occasional rumors reached them of a Spanish diplomat making inquiries in territorial capitals. But the storm they had anticipated dwindled to distant thunder that eventually faded entirely. In that time, their homestead transformed. What had once been Takuna's solitary refuge became a place of unexpected community. The trading post owners, Henri and Nantai, became regular visitors. Navajo traders included their cabin on seasonal routes. Even a few open-minded settlers stopped for Maria's healing remedies, which had gained reputation for effectiveness. Most surprising were the children, mostly mixed heritage youngsters from the margins of both societies who came for the lessons Maria offered beneath the cottonwood trees. She taught languages, Spanish, English, and the Apache she had learned from Takuna, along with reading and mathematics. The children, neither fully accepted by settlers nor native tribes, found in the homestead a place where their dual heritage was valued rather than shunned. Takuna's role evolved as well. His formidable reputation, once a burden, became an asset as he mediated disputes between settlers and native peoples, translating not just words but intentions and cultural meanings. The army even called upon him occasionally, not as a scout but as a negotiator, a role he accepted selectively, only when convinced both sides sought genuine resolution. On a golden autumn afternoon, Takuna returned from such a negotiation to find Maria in the garden, harvesting the last vegetables before frost. Her smile at his approach still quickened his heart, a reaction that had not diminished with familiarity. "Welcome home," she called, setting aside her basket to embrace him. As they walked toward the cabin, Takuna noticed her palm press momentarily against her abdomen, a gesture he had observed increasingly over recent weeks. He had waited for her to speak of it, patient as always. Inside, Maria prepared tea from herbs she had dried during summer. Her movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, and Takuna recognized the signs of something important forthcoming. "I have news," she said finally, her voice both nervous and joyful. "I have guessed," he replied gently. Her eyes widened. "You knew, suspected, hoped." His large hand covered hers on the table. "A child comes." Maria nodded, tears brightening her eyes. "In spring, when the wildflowers return." That evening, after sunset painted the mountains in rose and gold, Takuna disappeared into his workshop, a small structure he had built adjacent to the barn. Maria had learned to give him privacy there, respecting his need for solitude to create. When he didn't return for supper, she knew he was absorbed in something significant. Near midnight, he finally entered the cabin, carrying an object covered with a cloth. Wordlessly, he set it before her and removed the covering. A cradle, masterfully carved from cedar, its surfaces polished to satin smoothness. The design incorporated elements of both their heritages. Apache symbols of protection and guidance flowed into Spanish rosettes and curved flourishes. Along the headboard, he had carved 3 words in 3 languages: beloved in English, Corito in Spanish, and Ayu Ananishni in Apache. "It's perfect," Maria whispered, running her fingers over the lovingly crafted details. "First gift for our child," Takuna said, his deep voice gentle with wonder. "Who will speak 3 languages? Know 2 worlds. Create new path." As Maria leaned against his solid strength, she marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From the auction block where he had purchased her to this moment of creating new life together. A transformation neither could have imagined. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly. "Of what our child might face in a world that doesn't understand us?" Takuna considered this with his characteristic thoroughness. "World changes," he finally said, slowly, like river-shaped stone. "Our child will help change it just by being." Maria thought of the mixed heritage children who had found acceptance at their homestead, of the tentative bridges being built between communities, of the small but growing circle of people who saw value in their unusual union. "Then we will give this child roots and wings," she decided. "Roots in both our traditions, and wings to soar beyond them." Takuna's hand came to rest gently on her still flat abdomen, his touch reverent. "New life," he murmured. "New beginning." In that moment, the homestead felt like the center of an expanding circle, a place where something unprecedented was taking root, something that might, with time and nurturing, help heal the divisions of the frontier world. 5 years passed like water flowing in the nearby creek, sometimes rushing, sometimes gentle, but always moving forward. The homestead had grown to include a larger classroom where Maria now taught a dozen children, a second cabin for visitors, and gardens that fed not only their family but often provided surplus for neighbors in need. On a bright summer morning, Takuna stood at the corral fence, watching his daughter Esperanza demonstrate her riding skills on a gentle pony. At 5 years old, she was fearless, her father's height already evident in her long limbs, her mother's quick intelligence shining in her eyes. Her skin tone was between her parents', her hair a mass of black curls, and her language a fluid blend of all 3 tongues spoken in their home. "Mira Papa," she called, switching effortlessly between Spanish and English. "Look how fast I can go." "Carefully, little one," he cautioned, his deep voice gentle with the love that still surprised him daily. "The earth will always be there to catch you, but it is a hard catching." Maria joined him at the fence, slipping her hand into his much larger one with the easy familiarity of years together. "She rides like you," she observed, "as if born to the saddle." "Has your spirit, though," Takuna replied. "Questions everything." They shared a smile as Esperanza demonstrated a trick Takuna had taught her. Standing balanced on the pony's back, arms outstretched like a bird in flight, her laughter carrying across the homestead. Later that day, as afternoon shadows lengthened, a visitor arrived, Henri from the trading post, delivering supplies and news from the wider world. Among the items he brought was a special commission Maria had arranged months earlier, a painted family portrait by a traveling artist who had stayed with them briefly. The portrait captured the 3 of them against the backdrop of their mountain home. Takuna standing tall and dignified, Maria seated beside him with quiet grace, and Esperanza between them, one hand in each of theirs. What made the painting remarkable was not just its technical skill, but the dignity with which it portrayed them, not as curiosities or exceptions, but simply as a family, bound by love rather than convention. That evening, after Esperanza was asleep in the small room adjoining theirs, Maria and Takuna sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The wooden ring he had carved still adorned her finger, its surface now smooth from years of wear. His arm rested comfortably around her shoulders, their bodies finding their familiar fit. "Do you ever think about it?" Maria asked softly. "The market where we met?" Sometimes, Takuna admitted. Strange beginning. I was so afraid that day, she recalled. When you purchased me, I thought I was just passing from one owner to another. And now, Maria leaned into his solid warmth. Now I understand you were never buying a person. You were buying a chance to help, to do what was right when so much was wrong. Takuna nodded, his expression thoughtful in the fading light. Did not know I was also buying my own freedom. Your freedom? She questioned. From loneliness, he explained simply. From life between worlds, belonging nowhere. His arm tightened gently around her. You and Esperanza, you are my home now. Not this place. You. From inside came the soft sound of their daughter turning in her sleep, a murmured word in her dream-blended language. The sound held all the promise of the future. A child born of two worlds, belonging fully to neither and yet creating something new from both. The portrait hung on the cabin wall caught the last rays of sunset through the window, the painted faces illuminated briefly in golden light. It represented more than their family. It stood for the possibility that boundaries could be crossed, that hearts could find each other across the divisions of history and heritage, that love could take root in the most unlikely soil. We should visit the market again someday, Maria suggested. Show Esperanza where our story began. Takuna considered this, then nodded. Good to remember beginnings when celebrating what they became. As night settled fully around their homestead, the stars appeared in familiar patterns overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their journey from captor and captive to partners and parents. Their story, improbable as it once seemed, had become simply their life. A life built choice by choice, day by day, with the courage to imagine something that had no precedent but now, undeniably, existed. A life where a woman once sold as property had found the truest freedom in the hands of the very man who bought her.